Today is the General and Capital Funds workshop, and we have some special guests. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Pace. Do you have anything before we get started?
Absolutely not, Madam Chair. Thank you for having us here this afternoon to share with you kind of what we are proposing for this year's budget. I mean, obviously, some things will change based on priorities of the board, our new strategic plan, but this is kind of where we are right now, where we're proposing we would like to go, and then we're seeking the board's direction.
Perfect.
I'll turn it over to our Chief Finance Officer, Sarah Graber, and our Budget Director, Jose Gonzalez.
All right. Okay, so you all have the budget book in front of you. Just a reminder, this is just the kind of the first draft of our general operating fund and our capital funds, and seeking board's input at this point, and then moving forward in the next round next month, we will have all funds for the first official draft of the budget for next fiscal year. So just flipping through, you have the table of contents, and then in the introductory section on page I-2 is our budget timeline. The highlighted lines are the items that are either a board workshop or a board hearing. So we are here today on June 21st for the board workshop for general and capital. And then from here, our next board presentation will be on July 12th, when we will present the superintendent's proposed budget. That is not an action item at that time, just the first presentation of the full budget. And then the two required public hearings will take place on August 2nd, and then the final will be on September 6th, when we'll ask the board to approve the final budget and millage rates. The next couple pages of the document go through our budget conventions. Nothing significant has changed here from prior years, so you can read that at your leisure. Nothing of note there that's changed. Then page I-6 has our FTE, historical and projected overview. So, again, you can just see the tremendous growth that our community has experienced in our student counts. And if you look down at the bottom, the actual numbers, you can see that we're projecting growth next year of 4.78%. Some of that is growth in charter schools and voucher programs, but still a significant amount of growth in our traditional schools as well. Then the next two pages break down those FTE projections to the school level. You can see on the first page all the detail of our traditional schools and alternative schools, and then the next page has the charter school breakdown, along with McKay, Family Empowerment, and our undistributed. So you can see there on line 91 the growth in the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program. We're projecting that to grow by another little over 1,000 students going into next year. And then we do have 911 FTE held back for undistributed, along with a portion held back in charter undistributed.
For the Family Empowerment Scholarship, do we know where those students are using that scholarship?
We get that information once they have enrolled. That process goes through at the state level as far as their application and enrollment, but once that's done and they've been awarded the scholarship, then we do get the data.
So around October?
If they're in by that, yeah. It's rolling. I think it can change throughout the year, but we get that on a quarterly basis.
One of the interesting phenomenon that's been observed across the state, I haven't checked our numbers lately, is that many of the students and families who are using the Family Empowerment Scholarships are not students who were enrolled in a traditional public school setting to begin with. When we looked at it, I believe almost 50% of the students had never been enrolled in our systems who had chosen to take advantage of the Family Empowerment Scholarship for a private school enrollment someplace. And we kind of try to look to see if there are particular schools, centers, for example, that are attracting more students, other than a couple of situations where they specifically focus on some exceptional student education students. It's pretty much a little bit here and there, not one particular area.
So you mean not enrolled in our system, such as students who have been homeschooled, or is it homeschooled and maybe private school?
Some private schools had already been enrolled, some homeschool, and a lot of incoming kindergarten students.
Got it. Thank you.
So the next page, page I-9, is just an estimate as of May 31st from the property appraiser of our gross taxable value. You can see on here if they have our gross taxable value estimated at $43.5 billion. And on July 1, we will get the certified taxable value and then update the documents as such. The next page shows our tax millage and the tax levy, last 10-year history. So again, you can see the growth. The chart in the middle of the page shows the growth in the tax roll itself. And then the numbers at the bottom, you can see the actual increase in percentage of the tax roll is forecasted to be 21.28%. So significant growth in the tax roll of taxable value this year. And then that translates into the increase in the levy of 20%. We do expect, since that our taxable value is higher than what it was originally used when the legislature did the first FEFP calculation or the conference report, we do expect that since the tax roll is going to be significantly higher, we expect to see that required local effort and millage rate drop to compensate for the increase in the tax roll.
Keep in mind the impact of what that's saying with that required local effort, rather than even holding it constant, will likely go down. So we collect basically the same amount of funds, even though the taxable value has increased significantly.
So right now it's set at 3.606, so expect to see that go down when the second calculation is released in mid-July.
I'm hoping, because usually commercial lags behind residential growth. You know, we've experienced this mushroom cloud of residential growth over the last few years. I'm hoping that as we move forward, then we'll benefit from the commercial that's kind of lagged behind. Well, that's really where we're going to get the biggest bang, would we say, for the commercial tax bill.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we'll see.
The next page, page I-11, is our FEFP comparison. So the first column shows the fourth calculation where we ended the last school year, and then in comparison to where we're starting for next year. So at the top, you have the FTE breakdown. Here you can kind of see where the FTE is projected, broken down by traditional schools versus charter, McKay, and family empowerment.
They have like a family empowerment strategic plan or something?
That's the voucher.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
the private school
30%.
vouchers.
Yeah. Holy smokes. Okay.
And then just some other significant changes. Line 15, the base student allocation. You'll remember that's going up by $214 per student, along with the requirement to move to the $15 minimum wage. So a lot of the increase in the dollars there is going towards increasing salaries of our support staff.
Do you know what percentage of that?
Not off the top of my head, but we can probably figure that out. And then some of the other significant changes this year were a little bit more money was put into the reading categorical, the mental health allocation, and the safe schools allocation. So those were increased at the state level. Most of the other increases that you'll see here are just workload based on the increase in our student numbers.
And the proposed mental health allocation plan will come forward at our July 12th meeting, along with an information item to talk about the different services that we provide.
Can I actually go back to the BSA real quick? I don't think I've ever asked this before. What percentage of the base student allocation goes to salaries in general? Or
Do Do you have a ballpark idea off the top of your head, or, I mean, we'd have to kind of break that down?
Yeah, to break it down, I mean, if you look at the total budget, you're talking about 80 to 85%
Of
of
the
the total
total
budget and
operational
salaries.
budget.
So
But we
have to
also
break that
have-
down to the BSA.
Yeah, because we also get other funding. Okay, thank you.
Just to note on line 31, the funding compression is still in there. You'll see our amount went down slightly compared to last year. And that's just a function of the formula statewide. Then line 32 is the teacher salary increase allocation, the Florida classroom teacher compensation. And so that increase of 7 million, that was the statewide increase of changing that from 550 million up to 800 million. So that's where a lot of the teacher raises are funded out of.
What line is that?
32, it's
Thank you.
labeled Florida classroom teacher compensation.
Thank you.
And then just jumping down to the bottom, line 53 is the increase in per student funding of $287, or 3.79%. We'll always look at that on an unweighted basis, so line 53. And again, a big portion of that 3.79% increase is the increase in salaries for both the support staff, the move to minimum wage, along with the increase in the teacher salaries.
Okay, I'm confused about something. This may not, well, yeah. So, the governor signed off, what was it, 500, well, how many millions additional for teacher salaries?
Teacher salaries, it started 2 years ago at 500 million, then it went to 550
800. It was
last year,
800.
and then up to 800.
It was 800, okay,
Yeah.
so we're getting that in the form of FTE, or was that like a separate category?
It's this categorical in the FEFP.
And that's, okay,
It's
so
line
that's 32, okay, that's where 32 is,
So line 32, so
okay.
Osceola's allocation went from 13.5 million
Okay.
to 20.5 million
Okay,
for
so
next
this is
year.
32, but there are still some more in the BSA. So the
The
BSA is like
majority
general,
of
the majority is
salaries are
here,
sitting in the
and then this is
BSA.
the additional that we got based on the legislative initiatives.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Next page I-12, is the total funding and per student funding graphs and increase over time. So again, just showing the growth. And we are now up to $7,855 on average per FTE for next year. The next page I-13, is our ranking in per student funding. I know we always like to monitor this, so right now we are sitting at 64th at the $7,855. And again, this will shift slightly with the next version when the second calc comes out. But we're pretty consistently down there in the bottom handful. The next couple of pages are just the narrative that goes through all of the different components of the FEFP. So we just looked at the numbers themselves. This is just the narrative that you can read through, explaining each categorical. And again, aside from the numbers for next year, no significant changes in what those categoricals are or what they represent. So moving into the general fund section, page 1-2 is kind of our one-page view of the entire general fund budget summary. You can see at the top, we're projecting this June 30th to end with a fund balance of $87.6 million. And then we have the revenues broken out for next year by significant category. So you can see at the top, the majority of our revenues, as you know, come through the FEFP program, the Florida Education Finance Program, and then our local district school taxes. That's the levy that's also included within the FEFP calculation, along with class size reduction. We are also continuing to transfer in what we can from capital projects to help us fund operations. And so that's the next big chunk, and then you'll see everything else kind of broken out below that.
How we, on 41 on utilities and fuel, and I'm sure that was some heartache on that one.
So yes, we increased that budget by, I think, 1.1 million going into
To
next
offset-
year.
Okay, to
The
offset
increase in the fuel
increase in
costs. Yep.
Okay.
And, over the last several years, our team's done a lot of great work reducing utility costs. So we've already been able to get that down significantly, but obviously the increase in fuel costs
Fuel
has
costs
got to
is-
be accounted for in this
I know,
budget.
I know.
And our transportation team has done a great job with route management and reduce the number of routes that we're running every day, but many of those routes are longer because they're actually serving more students. So in the end, we're.
Creswell, I think Sandy was telling me we got, wouldn't you say like 6 million miles a year? That's what we travel? That's just mind-boggling, just to traveling in Osceola County. And with buses only getting the best 8 miles to the gallon. Maybe 6 to 8. Wow.
So in the appropriation section, again, we talked about 80 to 85% of our operational budget goes to salaries. It looks a little skewed on here if you look at line 36, because we do have 20+% of our school district is in charter schools and family empowerment programs now. But if you also add those in and take account for about 80 to 85% of their budgets are salaries as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you can see that, once you account for salaries, there's really not that much discretionary budget left by the time you have to pay for your utilities and fuel, et cetera.
According to you.
So, as a percentage.
We do pay our utility bills. I would say, though, line 42, your school and department non-salary, that is what actually represents what they consider discretionary budgets for our schools and departments. But those are the things that they are using to pay for substitute costs, to pay for copy paper, copy machine, servicing, toilet paper and paper towels. All of those things come out of that 2.2% of the overall budget.
And one thing we were going to also mention is those school and department discretionary budgets are going to be tighter as we move forward because of salary increases, substitute costs are increasing. What was the other one we talked about this morning as well?
The increase in the paraprofessional rate.
If
for
we increase the
Southern.
field trip costs, all of those additional costs will hit the school not discretionary budgets along with grant budgets. It's just, kind of, so those standard things are increasing. We've also added in here, line 45, you'll see the transfer out of $3 million. We've gone ahead and accounted for that need in the health insurance fund. So we're budgeting to move $3 million additional both in the current year and next year to continue to sustain our health insurance trust fund without having to pass that increase on to our employees.
So that basically does represent additional compensation benefits for our employees.
And then on line 47, you'll see this budget is based on a surplus of $785,000. So as we move to the next page, in the long range, you can see we're projecting in this budget to have just slightly under $1 million surplus for next year. And looking back at the current year, the 21-22 column, you'll see the operating deficit of $1.3 million. And that, as we discussed before, we had planned for a $2.2 million surplus this year. That was the budget that the board approved at the beginning of the year. And then we got hit with the unexpected claims bill of $3.5 million. So that's why we had to use fund balance to take that out, because that was a one-time, non-recurring, unplanned for expenditure of $3.5 million.
So basically, when people say, well, what is this fund balance for? It's for exactly those types of things. Unanticipated, unplanned, one-time emergency uses.
It's our savings account.
It's our savings account, that's exactly right. But, you know, you'll hear some people call it the rainy day fund, or this isn't just about a rainy day. These are those
Emergent, maybe we
big
should call it the emergency
emergencies.
fund
There
instead
you
of
go.
a savings account.
And again, on the long-range planning, you can see right now, it's a little bit difficult to plan too far long-range in our business because we don't know what the legislature's potentially going to pass from year to year. But assuming that everything were to stay the same, that's really what this represents, along with the elimination of the ESSER and ARP dollars. As those grants expire, we know we're going to have a funding cliff issue if we don't plan strategically before we get to that point.
But that is one of the reasons why we have these budget workshops and seek direction from the board, because this is not reflecting that Sarah and Jose and I would recommend that we operate at a deficit of $14 million over the course of the next 2 years. We will have to adjust expenditures if revenues don't change.
The next 2 pages are all of the line item detail. So you can go through and see kind of what's changing there. But if you look at the bottom line on page 1-5, you'll see the increase of $21,000. So essentially, we made some changes. We had to add some line items. Some we were able to reduce, but all net, we're essentially holding line items flat. The next page, 1-6, is the detail of our SAI budget. So you can see at the top, $16.8 million is coming in the SAI categorical. And then how much of that goes out for charter schools, $3.5 million, keeps some held in SAI reserves. And then you can see about $9 million of that is going to fund salaries, so classroom salaries along with our reading coaches. And then the second half of the page kind of outlines some of the other non-salary programs that we use our SAI dollars for. The next page is our reading categorical. Again, same idea, the amount of money that's coming in specifically in that categorical. And then, again, charter schools get their proportionate share of that, and how much is going to reading coach salaries versus other non-salary programs.
So this is additional to line item 2 in the fund balance restricted for state and state categorical programs, or is this included in that?
This is actually, if you go back to this page, the actual FEFP breakdown page,
What number is that?
I-11. And that's line on here, if you're looking like at the the reading one, so line 28, reading allocation is the 4.2 million, yeah. So these pages are just the breakdown of specific categoricals within the FEFP funding.
This is just the detail.
Oh, yeah, this is important, thank you.
So that's 1-7, and then 1-8 is the same thing, the detail of the safe schools categorical. Along with, we also have a column on here for supplemental safe schools line item. So we haven't been able to completely cover our safe schools needs within the categorical allocation. So we also have a line item to fund some additional safe schools needs. But the good news is with the contracts that we've negotiated, even with the slight increase in our SRO costs, for next year, the increase in the categorical is covering all of our SROs. So you'll see in that first column for safe schools allocation, what this schedule is showing is kind of all the costs for all the SROs at all of our schools, and that's all covered within the allocation. And then on the next page, 1-9, you'll see the $429,000 that we've allocated in a line item to cover primarily our SRO needs during the summer for our summer bridge program, along with some of the software programs. Mutual Link, the Rave Panic button, Campus Optics. We just kind of keep track of that stuff separately so we know how much we are spending in the safety area.
We really are blessed to have the strong partnerships that we have with the sheriff and the two cities, because many, many districts do not have the kind of mutual partnership, cooperative understanding, and our share of this SRO cost comparatively is very favorable to the district. And we have great people working in our schools.
So that is all on the general fund, unless you guys have any other questions or topics of conversation. We'll move into capital projects. So I'm going to jump to page 2-3. 2-2 is just a summary. But then, as you know, in our 5-year capital plan, we kind of break that down between capacity and non-capacity. So 2-3 is capacity. This is all of our impact fee revenue. And you can see kind of at the second section at the top of the page, the estimated revenues for impact fees. We go over this every month with our business advisory board. We look at revenue collections and kind of reassess our forecast. And so this $80 million figure was discussed with that board, and they've advised that this is a conservative yet reasonable forecast to start with for the next 5 years. We are on track. We think we'll probably bring in about $95 million in the current year. So impact fees are definitely continuing to roll in. And again, our community is extremely blessed to have that funding source to help us with our growth and new school construction. Again, the plan here, we have 4 K-8s now in this plan: Kindred, Knightsbridge, Sunbridge, and we've added in K-8DD Roan Bridge with an opening date of August of 25, along with our next high school, AAA out on Nova Road, with a planned opening date of August 2026. And it came fast.
When I first became the superintendent in 2016, and we were building Tehopekaliga, that I was going to have to start planning for another high school. But yes, the numbers are there, the enrollment numbers out there in the east are crazy.
I know, I'm just looking at the timeline. Mark, that's only not that long far away from
4 years.
To kick in
4 years
planning.
exactly.
How long did it take us for
At
Toho?
our July 12th facilities workshop, we'll be bringing our test beds and our plan, our timeline for that. But to your point, yes, we need to move into design as soon as possible.
And then also the expansion of Nia City Academy. So planning for the additional 500 student stations there to expand that school. So we have budgeted $25.5 million for that school expansion. Other than that, we have another wing, classroom wing at St. Cloud High School in the budget. And then just some of our additional buses as we continue to grow that we can use impact fees to fund for growth. The interiors are also Celebration Island still under construction. That's all the main projects. And then the next page is everything else that's funded out of capital that is not student station or capacity related. So our main funding sources here are the 1.5 ad valorem millage, and then our sales tax, both our half-penny sales tax and the quarter penny that we share with the county, which is expiring in September 30th, 2025. So you'll see there on that kind of 4th or 5th line down where it says quarter-cent infrastructure sales surtax. If you go out to the 25-26 school year, you'll see where that drops off and goes away.
Yeah.
So that's based on, the expiration of that tax as of today, if it doesn't ultimately get renewed.
Vape detectors. Who would have thought we'd,
Oh, are you looking at the security?
Yeah, I was like, gosh.
A couple other things I wanted to point out that we have added into the capital plan. Our ERP or enterprise resource planning, that's something we've talked about as part of our strategic plan. As we move forward over the next several years, we want to start setting money aside because that's going to be a major cost initiative when we do get to that point of selecting and then implementing a new ERP system for our district. And that's for both the finance side along with the HR and payroll system. So at the board's direction, we've gone ahead and allocated to set aside $5 million a year over the next 5 years. So we'll have that funding source available when the time comes. The other thing I wanted to point out on here, the student computers, we have worked with Mr. Thorne and to ensure that based on our district's one-to-one plan and one-to-one strategy, the refresh cycle for student computers is built in here. There will be a bubble in that out year, the 26-27, but we're looking at potentially some leasing options or other funding methodologies once we get to that point. But for the next several years, kind of that $2 million, $2.5 million will address our refresh cycle for student computers. And then, again, just a reminder on our transportation facilities, we had already previously budgeted for the 2 transportation facilities on East and West, so that funding is in here as well, along with all of the other projects that were already here.
Mark, when's our estimated time on the transportation east? When do you think that would be complete?
Our substantial completion is March of '24. We're currently in the production design.
2 years behind the new high school that will be right next door to it.
Yes, right. And then right behind that is Transportation West, that design work is currently on.
Yeah.
Then, starting on page 2-5, and the rest of this section is just detail of the overall plan that we just went over. So you can see the detail for a couple of the key areas, safety and security, technology, cyclical capital, and deferred maintenance. We have all broken down for you, both what's already in the current budget this year that will carry over because it hasn't been spent yet, along with the detailed allocation for next year's budget. So you can see safety and security, we have that broken down by specific projects for locks, access control, DAS radios, some money for secure lobbies above and beyond what we have those secure lobby grants for, security cameras, window film. We allocate $1 million a year of our half-penny sales tax specifically for safety and security items. Do you have something to add? And then technology, you can see the carryover there. We have some specific projects, Poinciana High School retrofit that was already budgeted for. That'll carry over. And then our budget for next year. Enterprise-wide software, we have started funding that out of our capital ad valorem dollars, so you'll see some of those projects listed out here. ClassLink, PowerSchool, Canvas, our whole Microsoft EES, and Network Enterprise Software are all funded out of this budget. And then infrastructure and cabling projects. And for technology infrastructure, we actually split fund some of this. We use our half penny. We allocate a couple $1 million a year of our half penny sales tax dollars towards technology infrastructure, but we also use our capital millage dollars for a substantial amount of the technology, and the enterprise software specifically is funded through the millage. In cyclical capital, again, just a breakdown of all the projects that are currently approved and in the works. And then the next page, we continue to allocate.
We don't have dates on these, or are these here somewhere?
What do you mean date?
So, maybe I'm looking at this incorrectly. So, for example, a project, field and track repair, Celebration High School.
Yeah, so
We
we
have the
don't,
budget
on here, we don't
and
have dates.
Is it somewhere else?
Not within the document. I don't know, Mark, I don't know how easy it would be for your team to go through the whole cyclical capital list and kind of put expected completion dates. I mean, I'm sure that's something the facilities department
We
has.
can do that. Thank you.
That's a good idea. See if we can get that added. And then on page 2-10, as I was saying, we allocate $4 million towards cyclical capital each year. Part of that budget is what we, throughout the year as needs come up, this is the money we tap into to approve new project requests that come in from the schools. If it's something that's not necessarily urgent, but kind of a need or a want as we move forward, the leadership team assesses that, and this is the funding source that the board is sort of pre-approving for those needs.
So you can see we've got the athletics in the parking lot area that we're working on at Celebration K-8. Hickory Tree has a pretty extensive project involving replacement of their gutters, and then they're going to do some work on the sidewalks, but we have to trim those trees. The beautiful trees that are a part of the namesake of Hickory Tree are causing major havoc with the sidewalks and drainage and those types of
Pushing the
things.
sidewalks out for years.
The next section is deferred maintenance. Again, just the detail of all of the projects that are currently approved and in the works. And then our breakdown on page 2-13 is our budget going forward for next year. And you can see a pretty detailed list here of projects by school for $9.5 million with about $500,000 sitting there in contingency. This is our half-penny sales tax program. So in addition to the major comprehensive renovations, like we did at Michigan Avenue, St. Cloud, Denjon, and now we're working on with Gateway, this is the other real substantial piece of that half-penny sales tax program, is addressing our deferred maintenance projects.
And this is all based on evaluation of our facility condition assessment, right, Randy?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, that's what that's called, that Mr. Cavaney and his team revisit with facilities on an annual basis.
And once again, I always get the dates mixed up. Our quarter penny sunsets 25.
2025.
25. So that's going to be, that's right around the corner too.
Our half penny sunsets 2036.
Yeah, I don't
So
know about
we're-
the half penny.
We're good on the half
We're good on
penny
that.
for a
It's the
while.
Quarter we're worried about.
But yeah, it's the quarter.
penny.
It's the
Yeah.
quarter that's.
Robert and I will definitely be somewhere else in 2036.
No.
You never know.
Tell you what a bet.
Oh, Lord. Moving along.
Moving on, page 2-14. This is our debt capacity analysis, and this is specific to our ad valorem dollars for capital. So what this is essentially showing is just how much money we have coming in from that funding source, and then there's percentage restrictions on how much of that we could actually bond. And listed here, you have all of our current debt issuances that are being paid via that funding source. So if you look down at the bottom, the percent indebted, you'll see year by year that that percentage dwindling. That's just as we continue to make our bond payments and pay off that debt. We haven't issued any new debt against our capital millage in several years. Most of the dates on here are just refundings. So we have plenty of debt capacity. Should we ever get to a point where we needed to issue debt to fund a new school, we have the capacity to do it. But like I said, with our impact fee program right now, we're in
Well, the
pretty
money's
good
not gonna
shape
be-
to.
Money's going to continue, it's not going to be cheap anymore. Now, with interest rates, what they're doing, we don't know where that's going to land in the next several years.
How many refundings have we done, Sarah, in the last 6 years, several. I mean, we've
Yeah,
seen
if you
several
look on here, you can
monies.
kind of tell by the dates.
Yeah, 17.
So 17, 20, 21, and then what's not on this page is also our sales tax bonds. So I think we did two new sales tax bond issues with our half penny program. And I think we did one or two sales tax bond refundings.
So it's
Definitely
definitely
have taken
saved
advantage of the interest.
dollars.
For the folks listening with their popcorn, you mean refinancing? That's what that means.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Right.
Taking advantage of the lower interest rates than when that debt was originally issued.
And I see on the next page, it does show what those rates are.
Yep. And then the next two pages is all of the future debt service payments along with the interest rates. And then you can see the bottom number at the end, $300 million of outstanding debt along with interest right now. So every year we can continue to pay that down. And it's actually kind of interesting for me to look at because you can see a lot of it over the last 10, 20 years. We're just continuing to pay that debt off. So it'll be nice once some of these issuances are completely paid off and gone.
Yeah.
So we've had great counsel from our bond advisors and our financial advisors on some of these refunding opportunities. And, Sarah and her team have definitely taken advantage of that with the board's direction and the board's leadership.
Yes, and our whole financing team absolutely monitors that on an ongoing basis and comes to us anytime there's an opportunity to save dollars there. Couple other things, I just wanted to address some of the conversation about budget amendments that happened at the last meeting, and I know I was actually out of state at a conference, so I apologize that I wasn't here, but I know there was some confusion about the March budget amendments and what exactly is represented in our budget amendments. The way that our local government financial statements are shown is at the functional level. So when you see like instructional expenses, that is not necessarily representative of salaries. I mean, majority of teacher salaries are sitting in that line item, but it is not just 100% that's teacher salaries and anything that's not in there is not teacher salaries. What you saw happen in March, if you guys remember, the board had approved a $500 supplement for all employees. So some of that money moved around between operational functions, between like instruction versus school support or administration, in order to enable the dollars to be available to be spent in various areas, all for the purpose of salary increases, though.
I don't think we were confused about anything. Yeah, Robert and I were good.
Glad you guys.
I did ask Sarah, though, to make sure.
I wanted to make sure
No,
that
I know, I
was
just
out
feel
there.
like the folks,
Because I heard a lot of confusion, so we just wanted to kind of make sure that that was addressed.
Thank you for going over that.
And then the last thing that we also wanted to go ahead and cover in this workshop was just an update on the ESSER and ARP funds and the spending on those budgets. Leslie, I don't know if you want to come up here and if you have anything to share or add specific to what's going on with those grants. Leslie's kind of our queen of these massive federal grants.
The Grant Queen, oh my God, can we get you like a crown that says that? Yeah.
She deserves one.
Leslie and her team last week were at a conference on return on investment, correct?
Yes.
Regarding ESSER funds.
Love that.
Well, regarding all grants, and actually, we took somebody from REA, somebody from CTE, and then myself and two people from my group. So we're getting certified in being able to analyze grants and tell what the return on investment is, and even dealing with intangible items. So it was, that's why I was saying the 2 weeks, the 2
Yeah.
days before and the 3 days I was out. So, but now we have a group project that we're working on. And that group project is actually looking at our 5 elementary schools that we did one-on-one learning tutoring to see what the return on investment will be for that with all those schools.
One of the things that we've talked about with all of the investments that we've made with our ESSER dollars, these are going away right now, in 2024. So with every new investment, we've got to come back around, analyze the results of that to determine, is this something that we want to recommend we try to sustain?
Yeah.
Or is this something that goes away at the end of the ESSER dollars. And the same will be true with our staffing programs. For example, our mentoring program that we're making a significant investment in. We're going to come back every year and evaluate its effectiveness.
Yeah.
So do we want to continue those types of things? If so, we'll have to prioritize as we plan the budget.
One thing I just want to say about CARES, ESSER grants, ARP grants, as I go to different conferences, statewide conferences, our leadership and our board has been extremely aggressive and strategic on spending these funds. You wouldn't believe the districts that sit there, we have money, we don't know what to do with it, we have no idea how to. It's really unbelievable. I mean, you hear it too, right?
I have heard it with the ARP committee that I've served on with AASA at the national level. There's just a lot of angst about spending these dollars. I'm like, I was asked to do an interview with one of the national presses, and I'm like, well, we're not having any trouble spending our dollars. We just want to make sure that we're spending them wisely and that we're going to get the return on investment for those dollars that we need for our students to catch up and recover from the pandemic. That's what they're there for.
So, in the first page, this is just the allocation of the big CARES grants, okay? There's several sub-grants that we get on top of all this. The first grant was district charter and private schools, and the state realized that us dealing with the private schools was really a disaster statewide, so they have a hole going into ESSER and ARP. It's not that private schools aren't getting funding, but they have a whole different avenue of how they deal with it. We aren't the fiscal agent. It doesn't come through us, which has been a blessing. So, basically this is, we're doing with district and charter. If you turn the page to ESSER 1, CARES 1, this is the district portion, and we have almost spent our entire portion of it. We have about $50,000-$60,000 that is encumbered that we just haven't received items on, and also CARES 1 from the district perspective is pretty much complete. We completed that grant. Moving on to CARES 2, we have basically done a really good job of, I think this was the grant that really came right after the pandemic and really dealt with a lot of the post-pandemic items we were dealing with. The one-on-one technology, rolling that out, a large piece came out of there. A lot of supports to our schools, PPE, a large portion of it came out of here. So Sarah worked on, paying the COVID medical and all the leave and stuff, $5 million out of there. So this is, and again, we've got about, I think, right around 12 million still left. But again, a lot of our stuff is already encumbered, like there's POs in place, or, and it might be something that was, because it's a 3-year grant, scheduled to be paid over a 2-year period. So it's not that we're not spending it, it's just, it may be over a 2-year period. So again, this one, there's not money standing waiting to be allocated. It's just kind of the timeline hasn't come on all of it yet. So we're in really good shape on it. And then we've just started this year on ESSER 3, the ARP, which is our really huge grant. The district has $107 million allocated to the district side. We've spent $18 million of that, and this goes through September 2024. So again, the plan isn't to spend it all this quarter. It's over a period of time. So.
What is a textbook adoption?
This is the new math curriculum
Okay.
that the state approved that we could use these funds to make that investment. It's allowed us to reserve some of our other classroom instructional materials dollars as a part of our sustainability plan post-COVID.
Okay.
And we also did ELA.
And we also did ELA as well. I apologize. So that was last year's ELA adoption, and the current year we've ordered now our math adoption materials that we anticipate being in our hands by August.
That
Yep.
funding source.
That's the big thing in the last quarter that Sarah asked us to look, see what we could, reposition, was to do an amendment for the non-recurring retention supplements coming up next year that has already been approved by the union of 2.6 million, and we were able to maneuver things around to take that out of here, not to have to take it out of the general fund.
And that was actually recommended by Secretary Cardona and the federal government to use some of these dollars for those types of purposes. So the $750 retention supplement that has been approved and actually ratified now by Teamsters, and then for OCEA, it'll go to ratification in August to be paid the end of September, as well as the longevity supplements for instructional staff that were negotiated last year. So it's basically just a change in the funding source, but it's allowed us then to bring forward a balanced budget with the other things that the board prioritized earlier this year.
And some of the additional compensation that we've been able to work into our union agreements as well.
The other thing they just issued on this NRP grant is that they have said it's scheduled to end this one September 2024, but we can extend that out another year. If, we still have funds, then we want to keep going.
Right, so you have to send it back.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll have to send it back. I think
I
we're doing a
Make sure
really
we're
good
not in that
job.
situation.
Some districts that have no idea how to spend their money, we'll take it. Just ask them to donate it to SDOC.
Madam Chair, any other questions? Mr. Bass?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Did a good job.
Thank you for spending 2 hours with me this week. That was a long time.
Great conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Sarah and Jose. Appreciate your hard work and getting us to this point.
Thank you all.
I had an allocation of 2 hours for this. You did. That was weird. How efficient, you guys.
We'll take it.